It is 3 a.m. in New York, 10 in Kiev, and 4 on a Friday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Gon-young. This is ARIRANG Korea's only global network. We once again start this afternoon with the latest on the Sewol-ho ferry disaster, now in day 17. The confirmed death toll now stands at around 200, more than 200, with 76 people still missing. And for the latest on the search operations and the ongoing investigation, we have our Kim Ji-yeon joining us live from the news center. Now, first of all, Ji-yeon, how is the search operation progressing?
Well, Kanyang, there are growing concerns the bodies of the victims might never be found, as some of them were found being carried away from the accident site. One body, presumed to be of a female student, was found 4 kilometers away from the ferry earlier today. 2 days ago, another body was found 2 kilometers northeast of the accident site, which is the opposite direction from the one found today. So it's hard to predict which way the bodies might be carried away. Also raising concerns is that victims' belongings have been found as far as 30 kilometers away from the Sewol-ho ferry, which means the search area may need to be expanded. The task force says it's focused on preventing the loss of the victims' bodies and will intensify its search with the help of more than 200 fishing boats near Chindo Island. Layers of nets were installed a week after the accident site and will continue to be used during the ongoing search operations. Besides that, divers are searching open cabins as well as using special equipment to open block sections. They were to complete their search in open cabins in the first phase of the search and then move on to their second phase of the search. But upon the request from the families of the missing passengers, they are trying to get through blocked sections as well, where many of the passengers still missing are believed to be trapped.
All right, Gianna, also bring us up to speed on the latest on the investigations that are currently ongoing.
Well, the state authorities are increasingly closing in to those related to the practical owner of the ferry company, Byung-won, to find business irregularities that may have contributed to the ferry sinking. The local courts held an investigation to determine the validity of the arrest warrants of 2 senior employees of Cheongjin Marine Company earlier on Friday for negligence, and one of the employees admitted in his testimony that too much cargo onto the ferry contributed to the sinking of the ferry. But some key figures in connection to Byung-won, including his brother-in-law, refused to answer the summons for questioning earlier today. This is the second time Yu's brother-in-law, Yoo Hyuk-ki, who has permanent residency in the United States, has refused to answer to the summons related to the ferry sinking. The prosecutors gave a new deadline for Yoo Hyuk-ki to answer to the summons by next Thursday. The prosecutors say that this is an ultimatum, and if he does not answer this time, they will proceed with necessary measures, although they did not specify what those measures will be. I'm Kim Ji-yeon, and I will bring more updates later today.
Meanwhile, President Park Geun-hye says she believes it's her duty to officially apologize for the ferry disaster. Meeting with religious leaders on Friday, the president said she will do all she can to ensure that the missing passengers are found. She also repeated her resolve to reform the national disaster response system. President Park's remarks come amid criticism of her apology this week during a cabinet meeting. While she said she was sorry for the government's insufficient emergency management, some believe she should have made her comments directly to the Korean people. Now, referring to how rumors about the disaster response have hurt the families of the victims and caused social confusion, the president vowed to work to regain the trust of the Korean people. Meanwhile, paying his condolences to the victims of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster, Korea's finance minister Hyun Woo-seok has called on all government ministries to work on correcting irregularities. Hyun's comments came at a meeting on Friday with other policymakers where He also emphasized the need to do everything possible to support the victims and their families. Now, in a separate issue, Hyun pledged to help local companies advance into emerging markets through free trade deals. The government believes this will provide emerging economies with growth opportunities. Now, Koreans will take to the polls in just over a month from now for local elections. But the Sewol-ho ferry tragedy looms over the campaigns, with the rival parties doing what they can to distance themselves from the government. As such, the ruling party could take a hit come election day. Our Choi Yoo-sun explains.
The Sewol-ho ferry disaster has completely overshadowed the upcoming local elections in June. With only about a month to go before the polls, the ruling and opposition parties are keeping their campaigning relatively low-key as public criticism of political leaders grows over their inability to cope with such disasters. The latest surveys show poor government handling of the man-made disaster dragged President Park Geun-hye's popularity ratings to below 50% for the first time in a year. In the past, it's been the government and ruling party that have suffered the most politically from a disaster, giving the opposition an upper hand. But this time around, public mistrust spreads from the government to both ends of the political spectrum. In a move likely intended to distance itself, the ruling Saenuri Party on Friday criticized the government for its mishandling of the crisis. Party floor leader Choi Kyung-hwan then urged officials to mobilize to help the families of the missing passengers who have not been working since the Sewol-ho disaster on April 16th. The opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, on the other hand, said onus of the disaster falls on the government and its absence of a sufficient disaster management control tower. Co-leader Kim An-gil said instead of waiting for the government to determine who's responsible for the ferry's capsizing, the National Assembly should lead the efforts. Despite the political blame game, political observers say the outcome of June 4th elections may be determined more by voter turnout, as many Koreans still feel despondent over the tragedy. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News.
When the latest news meets the latest business stories, we give you a bigger and better picture of the world. It's Business Today with Moon Gon-young. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
North Korea has replaced its number 2, Choi Dong-hae, with a new player. The rapidly up-and-coming Hwang Byung-seo has been named the regime's top military commander. No word yet on the reason behind the sudden shakeup. ARIRANG News Hwang Sung-hee reports.
Out goes Choi Dong-hae, in comes Hwang Byung-seo. North Korea has replaced its top military commander, and a sign the regime's young leader may be struggling to maintain his grip on power. Reporting on a May Day event Friday, the North Korean Central News Agency introduced Hwang as the country's military Politburo chief. North Korea watchers are keeping a close eye on Hwang, who was promoted to the position of vice marshal less than 2 weeks after becoming a 4-star general. Why Choi was replaced remains unclear, but Kim Jong-un's recent criticism of military officers suggests it could be more than Choi's reported health problems. The latest power shift comes less than 6 months since the execution of Kim's uncle Jang Song-taek, and some see it as a sign the young leader's grip on power is still shaky. Experts say Hwang's speedy promotion may be intended to cap the power of Choi, who has been serving as North Korea's de facto number 2. Meanwhile, hopes for better inter-Korean ties are fading fast amid the regime's ongoing threats of a 4th nuclear test and cross-border slandering. North Korea has been stepping up its aggressive rhetoric since U.S. President Barack Obama's visit to Seoul last week, when he vowed to stand shoulder to shoulder with South Korea against any provocation by the North. Experts say this is part of North Korea's efforts to find its way back to the negotiating table. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Washington has tapped its next ambassador to South Korea. Now, he's currently the chief of staff to Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel and has been a close advisor to U.S. President Barack Obama for years. Our Kwon So will tell us more about him and his new strategies.
Mark Lippert, one of U.S. President Barack Obama's oldest and closest aides, has been nominated to be the United States' next ambassador to South Korea. Multiple diplomatic sources say the U.S. government notified Seoul of the impending announcement during President Obama's visit to the nation last week. If confirmed by the U.S. Senate, Lippert will replace the current ambassador Song Kim in the second half of the year. Kim, whose 3-year term is nearing an end, is expected to return to the State Department in September. As for Lippert's credentials, the 41-year-old is currently Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel's chief of staff. At the age of 32, he became the foreign policy advisor to then-Senator Barack Obama. 4 years later, he was appointed as National Security Council Chief of Staff and in 2012 as Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asian and Pacific Security Affairs. Experts anticipate that Lippert will strengthen relations between Seoul and Washington. Former Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs Kurt Campbell was quoted as saying that South Korea would be lucky to have Lippert, who is close to the president, as U.S. ambassador. Lippert is expected to focus on bolstering trilateral cooperation between the U.S., Korea, and Japan, particularly when it comes to countering North Korean threats. According to Pentagon officials, Lippert believes that security cooperation and historical disputes should be approached separately. This could be a concern to Korea due to sensitivity over Tokyo's interpretation of history and territorial claims. Nevertheless, South Korea's embassy welcomes Lippert's nomination as he has a good reputation among diplomats in the country. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
The United Nations is once again calling on North Korea to immediately halt its systematic human rights abuses. Meeting for the Universal Periodic Review of North Korea's human rights records at the Human Rights Council in Geneva Thursday, UN diplomats urged Pyongyang to end its systematic and widespread human rights violations, ranging from extrajudicial killings, torture, and child labor. They paid special attention to the North's notorious political prison camp system, where some 120,000 people are thought to be detained. The North Korean representative defended their existence and claimed the regime has improved the country's legal frameworks by enacting laws to protect the underprivileged. Korean auto sales in the U.S. spiked last month on the back of improved economic conditions and low interest rates. Hyundai Motors sold more than 66,000 units in the U.S. in April, which is a near 4.5% rise on year. Now, that is the highest sales total for Korea's largest automaker in the U.S. in the month of April. Kia Motors also performed well, with sales up nearly 13%. Auto sales in the U.S. usually pick up in the month of April, but this year the boost was pronounced. Total car sales rose about 1.4 million, the highest level since 2006, before the financial crisis. The tablet PC market continues to expand worldwide, but the pace of growth is slowing. International Data Corporation, an American market research firm, says worldwide tablet shipments came in at more than 50 million units in the first quarter, up just 3.9% from the same period a year earlier. The sluggish growth is being attributed to the rising popularity of large screen phones and people holding on to their existing tablets for longer periods of time. Now, Apple still dominates the market with a global market share of 32.5%. But Samsung is also gaining ground very fast. Samsung's tablets made up 22.3% in the first quarter, up 32% from the same period a year earlier. Now, Korea's tourism balance was in the red for the 22nd straight month in March, and this is according to the Bank of Korea and the Korea Culture and Tourism Institute, who put the deficit at some $21 million. On the brighter side, however, the shortfall is narrowing, dropping nearly 35% on year in the first quarter, thanks to a surge in spending by foreign tourists, particularly those from China. Now, despite the continual growth rate in the number of visitors coming to Korea, the country has logged a tourism deficit every year since 2001. In an attempt to protect the nation's young, minors under the age of 18 will not be allowed to work in the early morning hours starting from the second half of this year. The new policy measures were announced by the Ministry of Employment and Labor this Friday. Now, employers can currently hire people under the age of 18 to work at all times of the day upon receiving consent. But the new guideline means they will be restricted from working from midnight to 6 a.m. with the exception of extreme circumstances. Well, one of the best things about living in Korea is that a wide range of delicious food is only a phone call away. Mobile applications are also jumping into the food delivery market, and business is booming on that front. Our Connie Kim reports.
Food menus meet with internet technology. This is the concept a growing number of people are embracing in Korea, including 36-year-old Im Hyun-woo. Returning from work after a long day, Im opens a food delivery application on his smartphone and scrolls down to decide what he wants to eat.
I live alone, so I usually order from food delivery applications. There's a lot more variety to choose from. I don't have to worry about losing menus.
These types of food delivery application companies have created a profitable business model. They receive around 13% of every order in commission fees from participating restaurants. It's another way of tapping into the prospering food delivery market that is estimated at around $9.7 billion and growing at an annual rate of more than 20%.
The payment systems on smartphones have given direct access to hundreds of restaurants, helping the food delivery application market grow at a fast pace.
The love for delivery comes from the national character of Koreans who prefer things fast, faster, and fastest, which puts a premium on convenience. The rising demand has made the market a competitive one, with food delivery application companies battling it out for a bigger piece of the pie. In 2 years, experts say around 1/3 of the total delivery industry will be transferred to the online and mobile delivery market. New competitors are now looking to jump in. One social commerce company has been selling discount coupons of up to 30% for shoppers since February. Offering more options for a wider array of palettes in a convenient manner, it's a combination that's sure to continue enticing consumers to open their wallets and their front doors to food delivery men. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Numbers, numbers, and more numbers. A new set of economic indicators were released this week, which means it's time to check in on the current status of the Korean economy. For that, joining me live is our regular contributor, Dr. Kim Ji-yeon. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
Now, when we discussed the possible impact, economic impact of the Sewol-ho ferry tragedy, we reviewed quarterly growth. Now, let's revisit that with a longer-term view.
Right, and I'm glad we can do that because usually quarterly numbers are the best indicators to show overall trend. Monthly numbers, they vary a lot, and sometimes it's hard to read what the overall trend is. So in that regard, quarterly numbers are always the better indicators, and this is overall what you see. The red bars, those are the year-to-year comparison. Month-to-month or quarter-to-quarter indicators, they show overall acceleration of this kind of economic growth there. But over and beyond that, the red bars, the year-to-year quarterly change is the way I see it, at least in my own opinion, best indicator overall of economic cycle. So we are on the upturn right now, and as we discussed a few days ago, the big question out there is how long this upturn can last. Indeed, after this last number that we have, which is first quarter this year, the second quarter is a real big question. We have a big question mark for that. And the determining factor for the second quarter would be the trading environment, international trading environment, which seems to be overall improving thanks to the improving conditions in the United States and Europe, and mostly in the developed markets. Even though we have some difficulties in the developing market, including China, that would be one key factor. And the other one would be the overall domestic consumption. And as we discussed a few days ago, the May factor is a very important one. Usually on May, we usually have all these family days and all that kind of stuff, family vacations and long extended holidays. So usually we see in May overall boosting up effect of the economy. But this time, because of Sewol sinking, we are quite afraid whether there will be some kind of lukewarm so-called May effect. So a lot of eyes are closely watching for the second quarter number for now. So we will have to continuously watch this quarter trend.
Right. So how is this growth driven by production and domestic consumption?
The growth that we saw, the quarterly growth of 3.9% that we saw for the first quarter this year, that was driven by strong upward movement in manufacturing. This is monthly data. So because of the January number, you see industrial output. By industrial output, what I mean is manufacturing output. And because of the sharp decline in January, we may be led to believe the first quarter may not be as good. But the thing is, this is a year-to-year comparison. So keeping in mind that January 2013 was a strong month. That's why we had the year-to-year comparison that was showing weakness back in January. So overall, if you add up overall 3-month figures right there, we had a reasonably okay production growth in manufacturing that led to the overall growth there. And in terms of consumption, also we saw a modest increase, at least a 0.3% increase as compared to the previous quarter. And that was what we saw during the first quarter there. And what happened was in March, in the latest monthly number, we had a strong growth in semi-durables as well as non-durable goods, while the durable goods sales were a little bit weak. But overall, what seems to be a little bit confusing visually on the screen right now, what that's indicating is that overall manufacturing as well as domestic consumption, they are on an upward curve here.
So there is a rosy outlook out there, I suppose.
Relatively speaking.
Relatively speaking.
Right.
Now, we heard about, however, in facility investment, there was a quarterly decrease there in the first quarter. What is happening on a monthly scale? Right.
In monthly scale, the thing is, overall, this facility investment itself is a category where for a long time we were seeing disappointing results last year, leading up to last year, and then even beyond that, we were having negative numbers. But now, since last year, later part of the last year, we began to see some positive numbers, as you can see there. And overall, what happened was during the first quarter this year, as you mentioned, we saw a small drop in terms of quarter-to-quarter change in terms of facility investment. But that was because the previous quarter, as you can see on the screen, were a strong quarter. That's why we got to see quarter-to-quarter disappointment a little bit. But overall, the fair assessment, in my own opinion, would be that on the facility investment side also, we see some recovery here. And facility investment, as you know, is a very important one for longer-term growth. It doesn't affect as much of the immediate upturn, but for a longer-term growth, facility investment, the positive performance on that side is critical. And in that sense, I think what we are just seeing on the screen was another positive sign.
Sure. Now, we also know that the Korean economy is very, very export dependent.
Yes.
And we have been getting reports that the export side have been picking up very fast and very well. What do the latest numbers show?
Latest number is another one that seems to offer us a lot of positive outlook here. If we can take a look at the April number on the screen here, it shows 9% growth year to year. This is huge growth indeed. And so with that, this last month, April, we had a second largest monthly export number recorded. The largest one ever was October last year, where we had about 50.5 billion a monthly export. Even though in terms of growth percentage, you don't see it here on the screen here, but the absolute amount last October was the largest, and this past month, April was the second largest by a very small margin. So over 50 billion US dollar export. Korean exports are going once again very, very strong here. And as I mentioned, this is all happening because of the recovery trend in the US market as well as European market. But with that in mind, we have some possible challenges in the emerging markets, including China, where a lot of people seem to believe that the growth seems to be slowing down somewhat. And also Japan is a lingering factor. The Abenomics is not showing as much of an impact here, and a lot of worrying eyes are watching what is exactly happening in Japan. So there are those challenges. But overall, the wrap-up for today's discussion is that overall all the numbers seem to be indicating that we have a positive outlook down the road, unless though the Sewol sinking would have some kind of negative impact that will surprise us.
Right, so unless there's a significant impact, negative impact from this Sewol-ho ferry tragedy, we should be on more or less a right track, on right track to recovery, I suppose.
Right on it, yes.
All right, Dr. Kim Ji-yeon, thank you so much for today and all of this week, and we'll see you after the holidays next week.
Will do.
And that is all from me at this hour. Thank you for watching. Do join me again at 6 p.m. Korea time on Early Edition at 6.